Hello! Today I'm going to show you how to make this lovely shaped top dresser. We've got 3 opening drawers and 2 doors down here. We've got this lovely detail to the top and the mouldings on the inside of the shelf there. And I'm making this for my doll's house kitchen. I think this is quite a versatile piece that you could use in many different settings. And the technique that I show you for shaping these pieces is a really handy technique to know, as you can add some really nice details to lots of pieces of furniture. As usual, the cutting list is in the description box below, so let's get started. We're going to begin by constructing the base, so just cut the pieces needed for the base to start with, and the doors and drawers we'll cut once this piece is constructed, and that way we'll get a more accurate measurement, and we'll also then cut the pieces that we need for the top of the dresser once we've completed this piece. That way you don't have too many pieces on your worktop. We're going to begin by attaching the mouldings to the side pieces. So I've got here my glue, which I've dispensed onto a piece of card, and I'm using a cocktail stick to apply it. I've got a spare cocktail stick there to remove any excess glue, and I've also got a spare piece of strip wood which we're going to use to push the mouldings against the top and bottom of the side pieces, which will ensure we have a nice flush edge. And finally I've got here my clothes pegs, which we'll use to secure all the pieces together. So take one of the top mouldings, and they're the wider pieces, and I'm just checking there for the nicest side. If there's any little nicks or dents in the wood or anything, I like to glue those down, so you always have the nicest side of the wood facing. And then lay that along the top of the side piece. Make sure you've got a nice flush edge. And then you can bring in that spare piece of strip and press both pieces up against it. I'm just going to slide that over a little bit, make sure it's flush at the edges. Press that down. I can't see any excess glue there, so that's okay. And then attach the bottom moulding, which is the narrower one. Again, just check in there for the nicest side. Lay that into place as well. Bring in your strip. Got a little bit of glue on that one. Just carefully wipe that away, try not to knock it out of place. And then bring in your pegs and secure those pieces. And I'm just going to put a couple along there. It's important that you secure drying parts together, otherwise as the glue begins to dry the pieces of wood will curl upwards and you'll always have that gap in. That piece can then be left to dry, and you can repeat the same with your remaining side piece. We're now going to attach the mouldings to the back piece, and with this piece we're going to begin by drawing a pencil line down the centre. And the pencil line should be 42.5mm from the left hand edge. Do a little mark at the top like that, and that is 1 43/64 of an inch. And then do that same pencil mark at the bottom. So 42.5mm, 1 43/64 of an inch. And then just join those up with a faint pencil line like that. We can then attach the top moulding. So apply glue, press that piece along the top, again making sure you've got a nice flush edge along the side there. And I'm going to bring in that spare piece of strip. It doesn't matter that it's not as long as the pieces, you'll still be able to use it to do the same job. Like that, and then remove your excess glue and bring in your vertical moulding, and this piece is going to sit just to the right of that pencil line, but so that we're hiding the pencil line as well. glue it into place like that, and then just push it a little bit so that it's covering that pencil line. Push it right up against the top moulding. Again, remove your excess glue. And already that top moulding's starting to curl upwards where the glue's beginning to dry. So I'll quickly get this bottom moulding into place. And then we can clamp it all together. Push that along the bottom there, push it up against that central moulding. Again, remove that excess glue and then bring in your pegs. Let's secure it all together. I'm going to put one there as well. And I'm not sure how far they'll reach, but I'll see if I can get one. Yeah, get one in the middle there as well. And that piece can also be left to dry. Once you've allowed enough time for the glue to dry, remove the clothes pegs and then sand along each edge of each piece just to make sure that you've got nice flush edges. So hold the piece on your sandpaper and just sweep it along in the one direction. And do that with each side piece and with your back piece as well. We're now going to attach a leg to each side of each side piece. So apply glue along the edge of your side. Lay that back down on your surface, and then we want to attach the legs so we've got a nice flush edge along this top. So put them into place like that. Make sure all the pieces are pressed against your work surface. We're getting a nice flat back edge. And then bring in a couple of spare pieces of strip wood and press everything together. And I just find that by using strip wood to press it together, it's going to remain flat. When you just use your fingers like that, you can tend to sort of curl the legs inwards, so you always have a bit of an angle at the corners. So press it all in like that, make sure it's all flat against the work surface. And then whilst you're holding onto that, you can remove any excess glue. Like that. That piece can then just be slid along your work surface and left to dry. And you can do the same with the remaining side piece. Whilst the legs are drying, we're going to begin marking up the other pieces prior to construction. So start with the back piece, so moulding side down, and turn it so that the top is along this edge, and the top is the piece where you've got the thicker of the mouldings. So place it on your work surface like that, and we're going to begin by drawing a pencil line across the piece, 17.5mm. and that's 11/16 of an inch from this top edge. So do a little pencil mark there, 17.5mm, 11/16 of an inch, like that. Turn the piece, place the rule just below the line, and join that with a faint pencil line, like that. We're now going to do pencil lines for the draw divides. So we're going to do lines in this, just in this top section, and 29mm, and that's 1 9/64 of an inch from each edge. So do a little line there, 29mm, and the same at the other, or 29mm from the other side, and then move down to that pencil line and do the little line there as well. 29mm, 1 9/64 of an inch, and then turn the piece, and again just join those with a faint pencil line. The back piece can now be put to one side, and you can bring in your shelf piece which is the thicker piece, so from your 2.5mm 3/32 of an inch thick sheet wood, and your top piece, which is from your 1.5mm 1/16 of an inch sheet wood. And we want to do those pencil lines 29mm or 1 9/64 of an inch from each edge on both of these pieces. So I'll start with the shelf piece there. So a little line at the top there, and at the other end, same along the bottom edge, 29mm, 1 9/64 of an inch. Turn the piece and join those up, and then continue that line onto the front and back edge of the shelf, and that will just help us when we're placing those divides. Same there. Oops, and the same with the top piece. The side pieces are now dry, so we can mark those up as well, and on each of them we're going to do that same pencil line that we did on the back piece there, 17.5mm from the top. And we're just going to do the pencil line across the side piece and not onto the legs. So do your little pencil mark at that side, 17.5mm, and that's 11/16 of an inch. And the same that side, and then join them up, but just onto the side panel and not onto the legs. Like that. And we only need it on that side piece because the shelf will only sit in that section. And that way as well we haven't got a pencil mark then to remove from that back leg, which can be quite tricky once the piece is constructed. Join that up as well. And we're now ready to begin construction. So we're going to begin by attaching the back piece to the side piece so that it sits towards the front edge of the back leg. So apply glue along the side of the back piece. Make sure you've got a nice flush edge along the top there, and your pencil lines will line up. And you're really just attaching it along the join between the side piece and the leg. So press it into place. Once that glue starts to take, I can pick that up and show you what that looks like from the back. So you've got that little overhanging bit of leg at the back there, the same as you have at the side. So remove any excess glue, and don't worry if your back piece is trying to tip backwards, it will do because of the weight, but once we attach the top piece we'll square that all off. Now bring in your top piece, and that's the piece that we've marked up, and from the 1.5mm sheet, the 1/16 of an inch sheet, and then the thicker piece will go down here as our shelf piece. Actually, I just want to make sure that I don't need to trim any off there, so put it into place. Just move you up a little bit, place it where it should go, and then you're just checking that you don't need to sort of shave any off along that top edge there. So just use your thumb to make sure you've got a nice flush line. If this bit is overhanging, then you'll just need to sand a little bit off, but only do a little tiny bit and then try it again. But that bit's okay, so you can then apply glue along a long and a short edge. And we want the pencil lines to be on the inside of the piece. So get your sort of side piece lined up first, so that you've got a nice flush edge along the top join there. I just pushed that out of place as I did it, and so that it's flush along that front edge as well. And then you can bring that back piece in to meet it, and that will square the piece off. Press it carefully together, And sometimes when you're pressing you can move pieces out of place without realising it, so keep checking that everything's staying where it should. Just turn it around carefully and remove any excess glue. Quite a bit in there. And even though it's on the inside, you still want to remove that glue, otherwise you'll find that your drawers won't go in smoothly. I'm then going to lay that piece down, and we're now going to attach those drawer divides. That's sort of coming away from the top part there, but once everything's attached we'll pull it all together with some masking tape. That will keep it all square. So bring in your drawer divides, and we're going to attach these so they sit on the inside edge of that line, so each of them is on the inside. So apply glue again to a short and a long edge, and then sit it on the inside of that pencil line, so as you're looking at it, it's to the left hand side, like that. I'll turn that round. Make sure it's sitting upright against the line at the back as well, and you can also use that little line we did on that front edge of the top piece, just to make sure it's all lined up. Have a look from the front, make sure you're happy that that's nice and square. I think I just need to pull it out a little bit there, and then you can pop it back down and do the other one. And again, this will sit to the inside of that line, so this time to the right hand edge as you're looking at it. Just take a little bit of that glue off at the back because I can't quite see the line. Press it into place, and then you can have another glance from the front. I'm just going to let that dry off just for half a minute or so. And whilst that's drying off for a moment, we're going to drill the holes in our shelf piece for our door hinges. And we want to make the holes 1.5mm or 1/16 of an inch in from each edge, and also back from the front edge. So just begin by doing a little pencil mark 1.5mm from the side, so you can just do a little line like that, and the same at the other end, 1.5mm, and then turn it like that, and then you can do a little pencil dot along that line, 1.5mm or 1/16 of an inch from the front edge. And again, do that at both ends of the piece, like that. And then in my drill I've got a 0.75mm bit, and that's 1/32 of an inch, but you just want your smallest bit really, around about the same size as a dressmaking pin, which is what we'll be using for the hinges. So hold that upright and drill down. Once it starts to spin, that means you're through. We're now going to attach the shelf piece, so begin by applying a bit of glue along the bottom of each of those divides. And then we're going to attach the shelf so the pencil lines are facing upwards, and so that the drilled holes are towards the front edge. So again, apply glue along a short and a long edge. And then pop that into place so it's tucked right up against the divides. Use the little pencil lines we did on the front to make sure the divides are sitting on that inside edge. Have a peep and make sure it's all looking square. The drawers are looking nice and square there. Push it right into that corner and against the back piece as well. Press it against the bottom of the divides. that. Again, get in there and remove your excess glue. Peep inside the drawers as well. Make sure there's not any glue sitting at the back there, as again your drawers won't go all the way back. Like that. And we can now attach the bottom piece, and we don't need to drill holes in this yet because we'll actually put those in once it's all constructed. So again, apply glue to a long and a short edge, and then put that piece into place so it's sitting right along that bottom edge. So you've got nice flush edges at the bottom and the side. Press it into place, and we can now attach the final side piece. So apply glue along each of these edges. And then stand that piece up, and you can attach the side, making sure you've got a nice flush edge along the top first, like that. Flush along this front edge as well, and so that the shelf is also flush with the front of that leg. And then you can come and have a look at the bottom and make sure that's nice and flush as well. You've got time to jiggle things around a bit if you need to. Press it into place, and then you can pick it up and have a peep inside. Make sure that shelf there is sitting straight. I've just got to push it up a little bit at the back there. And then you can also just get inside again and get rid of that excess glue. Got a little bit in the drawer there. Stand that there like that, and then I'm just going to grab some masking tape, and I'm going to put a piece right over that side. So pull it nice and tightly, but make sure you're not pushing the top and bottom pieces out of place. I then want to lay it down like that and put a piece right across the centre. Tuck it round there like that, and again pull it nice and tightly. And then I'm going to put a piece over the back this time and onto the top and bottom. Put it down nice and tightly like that, just to make sure that that back is holding against the back piece there. And that piece can then be left to dry. As with all of my projects that include drawers and doors, I advise that you cut the pieces needed after construction of this main unit, and that will just ensure a more accurate size. So we'll start with the drawers. Now I have included measurements in the cutting list, but just use those as a guide, and come in and measure each opening, the width, height and depth, and then you just want to deduct 1/2 millimetre, if that, from each of those measurements, and that will just ensure that the drawer opens and closes smoothly. And then once you've cut the pieces, begin by applying glue along each edge of the base piece. Pop that back down on your surface and attach the sides, making sure you've got a nice flush edge along the front and back. And then bring in a couple of spare pieces of strip wood and just push those pieces against the base. And not only will that square them up, but you know then that you'll put in even pressure all the way along. Push that piece to one side, make sure it's not sticking to your worktop, and then you can continue with the rest of the drawers. And again, when you're measuring, don't just take one set of measurements from the first drawer opening, actually measure and cut for each of the openings, because you probably will find that they're different. Certainly mine were, even though it's only by 1/2 millimetre or so. The chances that they're all exactly the same size is pretty remote. So same thing again there. Make sure the base is also sat flush against your work surface. Pop that one along as well. And the final one. Once you've attached the sides to the other two, you should find that your first piece is now dry enough that you can handle it without it falling apart. So apply glue along the front and back edges. Pop that back down and then attach the front and back pieces, making sure you've got nice flush sides. Pull those side pieces out to meet it if you need to meet the edges of the front and back pieces. You want to make a nice flush box piece. That can then be left to dry. And the final drawer. And I've been out and tried the base piece in place in the kitchen, and it just fills that space out there really nicely. And already I'm thinking of ways that I can dress the piece. And I don't know if you've seen any of my kitchen accessory videos, one where I showed you the miniatures in my collection, and then the last Doll's House Diary where I started adding them to the kitchen. But there was a lovely glass cake stand, and I was going to have it on the island, but I think I'll probably have it on this dresser, and we'll have sort of cakey bits and some cookbooks and things. Whilst they're drying, we'll make a start on the doors. So same thing again with your doors. Measure the height and the width of the opening. Deduct 0.5 millimetre, if that, from the height, and then divide the width by 2, and that will be the width of each door. Now I take a little bit off the height, but I don't take any off the width of the door, because that will come off when we round the outside edge of each door before we insert the pin hinges, just to make sure that the door opens and closes more smoothly at those edges there. And the other thing as well to think about with these doors is that your height measurement is going to be less than your width, but you want to cut it so that the grain is running from the top to bottom of your door, just because it looks nicer, it looks neater. So again, I've given measurements in the cutting list, which shouldn't really be too far off. It just depends on the placement of this shelf across here. I mean, certainly the width should be the same, so it may just be the height that you need to adjust. I hope I've explained that well. I feel like I was waffling on a bit there. And then they should just fit nicely in there like that and hold themselves in place. As you can see, there's not too much gapping around the edges there. So that's quite a nice fit. And now we're going to attach the mouldings. And again, I haven't given the sizes of the mouldings, as I actually like to cut those against the door. And again, that gives a more accurate measurement. So we'll do that next. So I've cut myself some strips of 0.8 millimetre thick sheetwood. That's 1/32 of an inch. So really fine and more or less like a veneer. So just choose your finest sheetwood. And I've cut these 3 millimetres or 1/8 of an inch wide. But this is an area where you can customise your piece. So you might want to do thicker mouldings, you might just want to have the square in the centre there, and you would then bevel each edge of it. Or you could even do something quite fancy and maybe do a shaped moulding in there. So cut yourself a square, and then you could curve off the outer edge on each door like that. That would look quite pretty. But for the sake of my sort of farmhouse style kitchen, I want to keep it quite square. So put one door to one side, and we're actually going to cut these against the door. Like I said earlier, it just makes for more accurate measurements, especially as your door might be a slightly different size as well. So lay the first one down the side of the door, so in the direction of the grain, that's from top to bottom, and then make a little score along the bottom edge of the door there. So we're not cutting into it yet, we're just making that score, and then you can move it away from the door and make the cut. And the reason we don't cut it there is because you're just likely to split the wood if you're not cutting it on a level surface. The same at the other side of the door, making sure you've got a nice flush edge along the top there. And again, make your score and then cut. And then we're actually going to stick these into place. I've got my glue here, and I've also got a spare cocktail stick just in case there's any excess glue that we need to remove. So glue that into place, making sure you're getting right along the edge of the door as well. Like that. Press that down. Just need to push that up a little bit. And again, with this glue, you've got time to jiggle. You've got jiggle room if you need to move things around, like that. And then you can glue the other edge into place. Again, always checking for the nicest side of the wood. There might not be any difference, but if you had a little nick in the wood or something, then it's a good idea to glue it down. Glue that one into place as well. Okay, making sure you've got a nice flush edge along there. And then bring in your piece of strip wood again, line it up so it's right along the edge of that first moulding, and again we're going to make that little score along the inside edge of that other moulding, like that, and then move it away from your door and cut. Same again along the bottom. Like that. Into place again, making sure you've got that nice flush edge along the top. Down. And I've also got my clothes pegs handy at the side here. I'm going to be securing all of the mouldings into place. I'm going to do these ones around the outside edge and let them dry, and then we'll do the central panel. But again, if you just want to have these ones around the outside edge, then you can do it that way. And I always attach my doorknob on this inside edge moulding, but I have seen people put it on the actual inside as well, and that looks quite nice. You could always do that. There's just little different ways of customizing your pieces. Okay, so let's peg that together. And I want to get one on each corner like that. And then let that piece dry off. And you can do the same thing again with your remaining door. Get those pegs out of the way. So for the insert, I just cut a piece leaving a 1.5mm border, 1/16 of an inch, around each edge. So just take the measurements on the inside of the mouldings and then deduct 3mm from each measurement width and height, and that will leave you that border. And then I just want to bevel each edge of this piece before I attach it. So do that with the piece in your hand and supporting it as high up as you can with your finger, and then just sweep along with a piece of fine grade sandpaper, holding it at a 45-degree angle, and we're just taking off that square edge. If you were to do this against the sandpaper on your worktop, the piece would just split. Like that, and I've actually got a tiny little split there in the wood, but I'll be able to hide that when I glue the piece down. So if that happens, don't worry too much. And we can now glue this into place, and I'm just going to do that by eye. So apply glue to the back of the piece. Like that. and then stick that down. And again with this piece, make sure that your grain runs from top to bottom. So just sort of get it into place, and then you can manoeuvre it around to make sure that you've got a nice even border. Like that. Give it a good press. So that little split in the wood can't even be seen now. I don't even know where it was. And then use your spare cocktail stick to remove that excess glue. Press the piece down like that to get all the glue to seep out. Like that. And then I'm going to use a few pegs again to secure that into place. And again, I want to put one at each corner. Some of these pegs have a tighter grip than others, so I'm always trying to find the tight ones. And again, that piece can be left to dry, and then you can repeat that with your remaining door. And do measure the sort of internal part again, rather than just cutting it the same size as this panel, as you may find that it's slightly different. Whilst the door mouldings are drying, we're going to attach the drawer mouldings. So just make sure first of all that your drawers fit nicely into place, and you may need to do a little bit of sanding if they're a bit tight, but if you do, just sand a little bit, try it again, and then sand a little bit more if you need to. You don't want to sand too much off and then have lots of gapping around the edges. Okay, so you can remove the drawers, and because I've got a nice fit on each of those, I've just written on the inside 1, 2 and 3, just so I know where they go back into the unit. With the drawer mouldings, I've done the same thing again, so I've deducted 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the width and from the height, and then that gives me that border of 1.5mm or 1/16 of an inch around each edge. And measure again each drawer individually, because the measurements will probably be slightly different. And I'm going to do the same thing again with these, and that's just bevel each edge in my hand. And I was thinking about using a brass pull on the drawers of this unit, but I've changed my mind. I'm going to use wooden knobs on the drawers and the doors. That's another way of personalising your piece, by using different drawer pulls or little brass drawer knobs or something like that. There's some really nice little brass sort of hanging pulls in my Etsy shop if you're going to make this into a sort of shabby chic style unit, which would look really nice with this style of unit, especially with that shaped top. So I'll do each of these before I attach them. Again, I'm going to just fit the moulding by eye, so apply glue to the back. And I've sanded the drawer front, given that a really good sand, so that I've got a nice surface for painting. And again, sort of position it roughly in place, and then you can jiggle it around to get that even border at all edges. Look from the front. Press that down so that all the glue seeps out. Just making sure I've got a nice straight edge along the top there, and then you can remove your excess glue. I think I'm going to need to go and wash my hands. I've got dried glue all over my fingers. It's starting to weigh me down, I think. Okay, and then with this I've actually got my mini clamps, and it's just that they fit inside the drawer better than the pegs, because the pegs have got quite a sort of long, I don't know, what do you call it, grippy bit. The tighter bit is higher up, so I find these work better on drawers. So that can then be left to dry. Do the same with the remaining 2 drawers. Once the doors are dry, hold the piece down against your sandpaper and just sand in circular motions like that. And I've already done these two, but that will just ensure that you've got nice flush edges around all of the mouldings. And we're now going to round off one edge of each door, and this will be the hinged edge. So hold the piece at a 45-degree angle against your sandpaper, and as you sweep it towards you, bring it into an upright position. About 5 sweeps should be enough, and that's just started to round off. Do the same along that other edge of the wood. I'll try and show you from the end there. See, that's just rounded off, and that will just help the door open and close more smoothly. And you can then just tidy that up in your hand with a piece of fine grade sandpaper, like that. I'll just slot that back in for now. And then you can do the same with the other door. We're now going to drill holes in the bottom of the unit for the pin hinges. So begin by making a little pencil mark 1.5mm or 1/16 of an inch in from each leg. And I'm using my 6-inch rule because it just makes it easier to do things like this. So do a little line going back like that from front to back, 1.5mm, 1/16 of an inch from the inside edge of that leg. Like that, and then turn the unit and you can do your little dot, 1.5mm, 1/16 of an inch back from the front edge. Go like that, and the same at the other side. And I've got here in my drill a 0.75mm bit, so 1/32 of an inch, but really you just want your smallest bit about the width of a dressmaking pin, which is what we're using for the hinges. So drill down and don't put too much pressure on this piece, as you may find that it'll split. And I did that earlier with another cupboard I was making. I did manage to salvage it, but it's rather annoying when you've spent such a long time on a piece as well. And turn that around and do the other one there. Bring in your dressmaking pins, and we're going to cut one in half using our pliers. It doesn't need to be exactly half, just roughly like that. Get rid of that end, and then with your first door in place, so that you've got a nice flush edge along the front there, and so that it's pushed over into the leg. We just want to make a little mark in the top of the door for where we need to drill the hole. So just pop it into that hole in there like that. Oops. And then come back in, and you just want to push it into the top of the door. So we're not trying to push it into the door. I know the bottom's moved out, but the top bit's in the right place still. So push that down like that, and then you can straighten up the door and bring in another pin, and we're going to do the same at the bottom of the door. Make sure the door again at the bottom is flush along the front edge and pushed over against the leg, and then you can just carefully lift that up, and you might need to just hold on to the door like that to keep it in place. Take another dressmaking pin. I'm going to do the same thing again down there. So push it into the hole so you're going just into the door, like that. You can then remove those pins with the pliers to do that top one. You can see there we've got that little mark there at the top and bottom where we need to drill the hole, and then you can do the same again with the remaining door. Now that's in place, I can see that that door is going to be closing in on itself. So what we'll do is we'll put a couple of door stops on the inside there, so that when they're closed they'll stay towards the front edge. We'll get these holes drilled first. So get that one out as well. To drill the holes into the top and bottom of the door, you'll need a desk vise, and I always keep a piece of folded up kitchen towel in mine, just so the jaws of the vise doesn't dent the door. So pop that in there like that and tighten it in so that it's nice and secure. And then using that same drill bit, that 0.75mm, 1/32 of an inch, hold it upright and drill down into the door. And you must keep it upright as it might split through the wood. Drill down about half the length of the drill bit. And you want to go down by about 1/4 of an inch, or about 6mm. And a way to check that is just to pop a pin into the hole like that. Hold your thumbnail at the top and then take it out, and that should be about 6mm or 1/4 of an inch. And I've got a little bit more there, so that's fine. And then you want to do the same at the other side of the door, other edge. We're now going to fit the doorknobs, and I'm using these little turned wooden knobs that are 2.5mm in diameter. That's 3/32 of an inch, and they've got a little stem there that pushes into the door. Now the biggest drill bit I've got in this set is 1.6mm, which is just over 1/16 of an inch, and the little stem is just a little bit wider than that, but I'll show you how to make the hole just a little bit bigger once we've drilled it. So begin by making a pencil mark in the centre of the straight edge of the door, and just do a little line going across like that, and then turn it, and you can do a little pencil dot in the centre there on that line that you've just drawn. That'll be where we drill our hole. Erase the pencil line, and the little dot will stay there. And you can drill your hole. Once the door starts turning, you're through, but just push the drill bit all the way through and then jiggle it a little bit like that, and that will just make the hole that fraction bigger that we need. And then you can try the little stem in there, and if it's still a little bit tight, which that one is, you can just use a cocktail stick to poke through, twist it through. That's a tight fit, and again that will just widen it a little bit more. That should now go in. Of course, you might just be more organised than me and have the correct sized drill bit in your toolbox. That's still a little bit of a tight fit there, so I'll put the cocktail stick in again, and I'm just going to jiggle that around as well. So that's a nice fit now, but I'm still going to put just a little bit of glue in there, just to make sure that's fitted securely. So I'm just put a tiny little bit like that in there. And then attach the doorknob. Make sure that it's sitting flat against the edge of the door, like that. And if you've got a bit of an overhang at the bottom there, I think I've just got a few splinters coming through there, then you can just sand that off. I'm holding the knob in place as I do that, like that. Do the same with your other door. The drawer mouldings have also now dried into place, so we can also attach the drawer knobs. So make your first measurement centrally across the drawer, measuring from each edge of the drawer rather than the drawer moulding. And again, do your little line like that, and then turn and make your pencil mark centrally from top to bottom. And then you can do your little pencil dot like that. And then erase, oops, camera handle there. Erase the pencil line, and again you can drill your hole. Same size drill bit and drawer knobs I'm using. And again, be really gentle when you're drilling down into the drawer front. And again, jiggle the drill bit around like that and check the little stem goes in. Yep, that's fine this time. And again, a nice tight fit, but I'm still going to use a little bit of glue. And I know they're not ever going to come out. And again, make sure that's sitting flat against the drawer front. Remove any excess glue. And repeat with the remaining 2 drawers. So I mentioned earlier about putting a little door stop in just inside the door opening, just so that the doors sit nice and flush towards the edge of the unit and don't sort of try and keep closing in like that. So to do that, you just need a piece of 3x3 strip, that's 1/8 of an inch strip, and you want to begin by making a little pencil mark in the centre of the door opening, just like that. Do the same at the top as well. And then you want to make a little pencil mark going 3mm back, and that's the depth of our door. So just do a little faint line going across there like that, and that's how far back we want to position the door stop. Another one along that bottom edge. It's a bit dark in there, can hardly see. Like that. And then I'm just going to cut this little piece of strip in half. See if I can do that with my craft knife. Like that. I'm going to grab my tweezers and just hold on to one of the pieces like that. Apply glue along one edge. And then you just want to sit that behind that little line we've just done, and so that that central pencil mark is roughly in the centre as well. These aren't going to be seen, remember, unless you display your cupboard with an open door. And press that down. And then just stand one of your doors in place, and you want to make sure it's not too far forward so that it's not actually pushing it out the other way. That's quite a nice fit there. And then you want to do the same thing again at the other edge of the door. I'll just remove that excess glue. So turn that over. Where did the other bit go? There it is. Again, apply a little bit of glue. Like that. So put that in there and manoeuvre it into position. So it's sitting roughly central like that. And then again, you can try the door just to make sure it's not pushing it out, and that can actually come forward a little bit. So again, you've got time to manoeuvre it before the glue dries. And then once you're happy with the position, give it a good firm press into place. like that. So the unit, the drawers and the doors are all now ready for paint. So I'm going to put all these pieces to one side, and I actually want to construct the top part and then I can paint all of the pieces together. Before we start the dresser top, I just want to shape the top piece for the base part, and to do that we're going to round off one long edge and both short edges. So hold it against your sandpaper at a 45-degree angle, and as you sweep it towards you, bring it into an upright position. That's just starting to round off there. Do that at each edge as well. And then turn the piece over and do the same on the underside. And once again, just tidy that piece up with a piece of fine grade sandpaper. Gently round off the corners as well. We're going to begin by shaping the back part. So cut a template from paper, measuring 90mm by 16mm, and that's 3 3/35/64 of an inch by 5/8 of an inch. And then we're going to draw a line down the centre lengthwise. So just do a little pencil mark at each end, centre there. And then turn and join those up. And then fold the template in half like that. We're now going to draw the pattern to actually shape the top. So when you're creating mouldings, you can be as adventurous as you like with your shapes, but try not to be too intricate, because remember you've then got to cut those out of wood. So we're going to start in the centre, and I'm going to start by doing an arch like that. I'm going to come down, maybe go into a little point, and then go down again, another little curve, and maybe come up again like that. And then the idea of this line is this is where we want the shaped top part to end. So however you end your pattern, bring it back up to that line. So I'm going to go down again like that, and then come up like that. So that's not too elaborate, but you've still got some nice shapes in there. You then want to cut that out, open that out, and then we're going to trace that onto the back piece, but we're just going to draw that line again, 16mm or 5/8 of an inch from what will become the top edge, just so that we lay the template straight along there. So do a little pencil mark at each end, and then turn the piece and join that up. And then lay the template along the line, and we're going to copy that onto the wood. And you can use a little bit of masking tape to stick it if you want to. I'm just going to hold mine in place. Like that. So now bring in your scribe tool, and this is rather like a pencil, but it's got a nice sharp tip on there, and we're just going to use this like we would a pencil, just to etch that line into the wood. So we're not trying to score through, you're just doing some gentle strokes just over the pencil line. And the lighter you do it at this stage, the better, because then you're more likely to stay on the pencil line. It's always going to be harder etching along the wood that's in the opposite direction to the grain, so go carefully around those areas. And then you can just go over that a couple of more times just to etch it slightly deeper into the wood, but still be careful to keep on track. Now bring in your craft knife, and I recommend putting a new blade in for this sort of job. And we're just going to go over that line again, just with the tip of the blade. So again, we're not trying to cut through at this stage, but we're just scoring that line deeper into the wood. And when you're doing something like this, always just be aware of where your fingers are in relation to the blade. Just always think about that. Keep turning the wood to get in the best angle. And you might want to have a practice at this on a spare piece of wood. Okay, and we're now actually going to start cutting away the unwanted wood at the top here. So cut some scores into the wood like that. Make sure you don't cut off the top of the curve there. And this just makes it easier, because then we begin just to remove one little section at a time. Turn the piece like that and cut along there. And if the piece isn't completely free, don't try and pull it away. Just make sure you've cut completely through like that. Get in there with the very tip of the knife. Cut out that little section first. There's no need to rush, just take your time. Again, just always be aware of your fingers. And this is a really good technique to learn. You can use this on so many different pieces of furniture. I think I've probably shown you it before in other tutorials. That bench that we originally did for the kitchen, that had those nice curved sides on it. Now we're going to go to the other side, score the grooves again. And this side will be a little bit easier as we've just had a practice. Turn the wood again, start with that little section. I'm supporting the wood with my hand as well there. This is why you need that new blade. It needs to be really sharp for this, as you'll just end up splitting the wood and the pieces that you want to keep. And that can be very annoying when you've spent a lot of time shaping a piece of wood and then it splits just as you're almost at the end. I'll just cut down there, make that into two little sections. feel with your knife for where it's still joined. A little bit still in there in that curve. Just go really carefully there, because that's not a split, it is a piece of grain right at that end there. But sometimes the grain can sort of weaken when you're doing things like this, so just be really careful when you've got like a tiny bit that you want to keep like that. Okay, now that looks a little bit rough at this stage, but we're going to go in and shape that with a piece of fine grade sandpaper. And just looking at that there, I can see I've taken a little bit too much off of that. But what I'll do is I'll curve that round, and then I'll curve that one down to match. So don't worry if it's not perfectly symmetrical. And also, once the piece is in place, that's not too obvious. So I'll just clear away these bits, and then I'll grab some fine grade sandpaper. So I've got here a 500 grade sandpaper, and I've just cut it into a really small piece, and I'm just going to work it around the cut areas. So you can sort of fold it into a little roll like that. And as well as sanding the line that we've cut, we want to sort of bevel the back piece from front to back, so that we haven't got a straight line along this front edge. So we're sort of going from front to back with the sandpaper as well, like that. So I'm just shaping this into more of a curve, getting rid of those sharp corners there. And again, just take your time with this, there's no need to rush. The larger curves you can wrap the sandpaper around the end of a pencil or a paintbrush. I might need a stronger piece of sandpaper to shape that into more of a curve, so I'll come back to that. Don't be too rough when you're sanding these little areas either. You might find that the wood will split. So it's all just about going slow, taking your time. And this is also another of those jobs where you don't want to do too much, as all you'll do is end up sanding away the shapes that you've created. Right, I'm just going to grab a little piece of 240 here and just try and shape that curve a little bit better. Now it's already taken off that sort of corner bit. What I did was just cut across the top of the curve that I wanted to keep and sort of made it into a flat surface, so that's shaped it round nicely. And then just make sure really it looks like the one on the other side, which actually isn't too bad a match. So I'm not going to play around with it too much, and I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm in danger now of sanding away some of those smaller patterns. But I am just going to sand the surface of the piece to remove that pencil line. We're now going to attach the mouldings to the back part, so begin by doing a pencil line along the bottom edge at 29mm from this left hand edge, 29mm and 58mm, and that is 29/32 of an inch and 1 9/64 of an inch, and then we're going to do those just a bit higher up as well. Obviously we haven't got a straight top anymore, so just sort of go a bit further up and do those measurements again. and then place the rule just below the pencil marks and join those up just with a faint line. And then we're going to begin by attaching a moulding along the bottom edge. Apply glue along the back of the moulding. And again, I've checked the moulding for the nicest side. Always have that facing forwards or visible. I'm going to glue this right along that bottom edge so it's flush at the bottom edge of the piece there. Press that into place and have a clean cocktail stick handy to remove any excess glue from along there. I'm then going to stick a vertical moulding right along the edge there. Again, make sure you've got a nice flush edge. Again, remove your excess glue. And now this next moulding we're going to stick just to the right of that pencil line, but so that we're hiding the pencil line as well. Press it right down against that bottom moulding. Again, so you're just hiding that pencil line, like that. Again, remove your excess glue. And this one will also go just to the right of the next pencil line. Again, so you're just hiding it. And then the final one will go along this right hand edge. Again, make sure you're flush against that edge. Press it right against the bottom moulding. And then bring in the final horizontal moulding. And we're going to glue this in place above the vertical ones. Press it against the top of the vertical mouldings. And then remove your excess glue. Like that. And then I've got some clothes pegs here, and I'm just going to fasten these into place. I'm going to put one over each join, like that. That piece can now be left to dry, and we'll move on to our sides. Cut a piece of paper that is the same size as the side pieces. I'm going to use this for our template. And then turn it lengthways like that, and we're going to do a pencil line 30.5mm, and that's 1 13/64 of an inch from the bottom edge. So do a little pencil line there, 30.5mm, 1 13/64 of an inch, and then join that up. Like that. And then we're going to do another line coming in 12mm or half an inch from this left hand edge. So again, little pencil mark at the top there, one at the bottom, and join that up. So the little join that we've made here is where our shelf piece will come to. So when we shape our side, we need to make sure that the wood comes out to here, so that our shelf piece is enclosed within the side piece and not sticking out in front of it. So again, we're just going to create a nice shape on here. So come down from the top corner there, maybe have a little bit of a point coming up like that, and then come out to where our shelf needs to be, like that. I'm then going to go back in slightly. Again, I'm trying to put some interesting detail in there, but not make it too elaborate. And then wherever you get to at the bottom, you want to come right out into that bottom corner. I'll just make that a little bit darker, and I'll hold that up and show you. Right, so cut that out, and then again trace that or copy it onto your piece of wood. Bring in your scribe tool again. I'm going to do the same thing again and just copy that pattern with the scribe. Again, just little strokes. Don't need to go too deeply. Go over it a couple of times, like that. We can then bring in the craft knife, and again we're going to score that a little deeper into the wood, just using the craft knife like a pencil. Beware of your fingers. Just little scores at a time. It's okay if you sort of come away from the pattern when you're scoring like that, but as long as you don't do it on the bit that you want to keep. And down like that. So we can now start making our scores for our small sections to be removed. And you can make as many sections as you like. If you feel more comfortable doing sort of smaller sections at a time. And start down there, and I've gone a little bit lower than my original pattern. That will still work, that's okay. Don't pull it away again if it's still joined somewhere. Then I just stab myself. Just work your way around nice and slowly. Because I've got such a small piece down there now, I'm sort of holding on to it as I cut these surrounding pieces. When you're leaving a small piece of wood like that, it's going to become fragile, so always sort of think about which bit you're cutting and which pieces you need to support. Just a tiny little piece in that corner I want to get rid of. When you're doing an adjacent piece, just make sure the base of the knife isn't going into a piece that you want to keep. Just be careful, really. Go slowly and be careful. And as you become more adept at this, you might want to start doing some more intricate patterns. It really does add a nice detail to a piece of furniture. And especially if you're a fan of sort of shabby chic furniture and things like that, sort of curves and what have you. Actually, this dresser would look really nice finished in shabby chic colours and dressed like that as well. So if you finish yours like that, do let me have a look at your photographs. You can add them into the group, little bits and pieces by you. Just pop over to my Facebook page if you're not already a member, and you'll be able to request a membership from there. Okay, so that's all the pieces cut away now. So I'll bring in my piece of 500 grade sandpaper again. And let's start at the top there. I don't want to lose that little detail, that little bit that sticks up there. I think that looks quite nice, so I'm going to be really careful around there. And by doing that, I've actually created another little shape there, which I like. So what I'll do is I'll use this side piece now as the template for the remaining side, rather than going back to the piece of paper, which will be slightly different now. It might be a good idea if you do use this piece as your second template, whether you've made any changes or not, because then you're more likely to get a better match. I've curled the paper over there to get into that little dip. With this piece we don't have to worry about symmetry, so you really are just tidying it up as you go along. And I really like how this is actually creating some slightly different shapes as I'm doing it. Those little bits there, I probably wouldn't have made them so tiny in the pattern. That's how they're coming out, so that's quite nice. Let's see if I can make more of a dip in there. If you can hear something bubbling away in the background, my husband's just put some eggs on to boil for lunch, so that's what that is. So again, I'm sort of coming from front to back, just to sort of bevel those sides over. And then on this piece, pay a little bit more attention to that other side, just because both sides will be visible. Now I know where my dress is going to be standing. This will be the closest side to the doll's house opening, and then the other one, if we imagine that's the other one, the inside edge will be the neatest side that will be visible. But because when you're looking face on, you will still be able to see the other sides of these pieces. Do sort of pay a little bit of attention to them. And again, I'm in danger now of taking away some of the detail, so I'm going to leave that there. I'm quite pleased with that. So bring in your other side piece, and then you want a really sharp pencil to trace that onto the piece of wood, because we don't want it to be wider all the way round. So I'm going to go and sharpen a pencil, holding the piece in place and just copying that onto the second piece of wood. Like that. And then just erase or sand away any pencil that you may have got onto that side piece. Okay, so I'll just stick that one to one side, and then we can do the same thing again with this one. So start with your scribe and just start scoring the pattern into the wood. And now we can begin constructing this top part, but I just want to start by rounding off one long edge of the shelf piece. So as usual, with your sandpaper flat on your work surface, hold the piece at a 45-degree angle and sweep it towards you, bringing it into an upright position. Turn it over and do the same on the underside. 3 sweeps should be enough, and then you can use a piece of fine grade sandpaper just to tidy that up. So we're going to begin by attaching the side piece to the outer edge of the back piece. So apply glue along the edge of the back piece. Lay that back down, and then attach your sides. You've got a nice flush edge along the bottom there. That's the bit that we're going to be standing on top of the base. We want a nice straight edge. Press it firmly to the back piece, making sure you're not putting too much pressure on your sort of finer pieces there. And to help with that, you can bring in that spare piece of strip wood again and press it against the edge. So that way you're just pressing those two joins together. Have your spare cocktail stick handy to remove any excess glue. Just pushing that upright a bit more, but when we put the shelf in, we'll sort of square it all up. So the shelf piece is going to sit above that top moulding like that. So apply glue along the side and the back edge. Set that into place up there. And then press the side piece against it. And then you can use that strip as well and just press it along the top of the shelf, so you're pressing it against those mouldings and then you know that it's sitting upright, and then press your side piece in there to meet it. Again, just check for any excess glue. And then apply glue to the other edges, and we can attach the remaining side piece. Put that back down on your work surface and attach the remaining side. Again, make sure you've got a nice flush edge along the bottom there. Use that to push it up. So I'm going to again use that strip to press it against the back there. And then now I've attached it, I can see the little bit at the top here is just a little bit taller than the side piece. So once this is completely dried, I can sand those in to match. So always check for little pieces like that, and then you can sand them off to match. So that piece can now be left to dry. These pieces are all now ready for paint, and I'm going to use the same sort of dark cream that I used for my other kitchen furniture, and I'm going to use the medium oak wood dye on this piece, and I've made the little masking tape handle there so that I can hold it whilst I'm applying the wood dye around the edges of the underside, as that piece is visible once it's in place. And then I've got something to stand it on whilst the wood dye dries. Each of these pieces have now had 2 coats of paint, and I sanded gently after each coat had dried. And we're now going to begin putting everything together, and we're going to start by fitting the doors. So we're just going to begin by taking a dressmaking pin, and we're going to poke it into each of the drilled holes in the cabinet, and that's just to remove any paint that might have got in there. Just poke that into each of those holes. Like that. We're then going to put a pin into each hole in each of the doors. So just put it in like that, and then very gently press that down on your work surface. Not too hard because we don't want it to split through the wood, but just to make sure that it's all the way in to the drilled hole. Same at the bottom there. Same again with the other door. Gently press that down as well, and then bring in your pliers. And this particular pair of pliers, if I put the sort of cut-in section at the top of the door and make the cut, I then know that that leaves about 3mm or 1/8 of an inch of pin overhanging, and that's what you want to go for. So if you just have some wire cutters rather than this particular style of plier, then what you can do is just make a little score on the pin with your craft knife and then find it with your cutters and cut along that. But you just want that amount of pin overhanging at the top and bottom of each door. So begin by removing the pin from the bottom of the door. Use your pliers to do that. And then we're going to put the top pin into place in the hole at the top of the unit there. So just very gently push that in, like that, and then put the door into position. Make sure you've got a nice flush edge along that front edge, and then you can pop the little pin back into the hole. Now this can be a little bit tricky, it doesn't always go in the first time, so don't worry, just take your time with it. And you're just sort of searching for the hole with the tip of the pin there. And then don't push the pin all the way in, so leave it just hanging out a little bit like that. And then try your door, make sure it opens nice and smoothly, which that does, and then you can push the pin in. And the reason I do it that way is that once that pin's in, you won't get it out without damaging the door, so always make sure it is opening and closing smoothly before you push both of the pins in like that. And then the remaining door, remove the pin from the bottom. That landed in a little pot I've got sat at the edge of my desk, that was lucky. And then pop that top pin in, like that. Again, put your door into place. And I had already actually just tried these doors into place without the pins, and I just did a little bit of sanding around the edge, which you'll probably find you need to do after you've painted them, because your paint will add a little bit of sort of thickness to the size of the door. And again, just poke that pin into the other hole. And because we've measured these with the doors lined up, you should find that it goes in fairly easily. But sometimes you just have to keep sort of repositioning the door to make sure that it's in exactly the right place. So again, leave a little bit of pin hanging out, try your door. And they're still a little bit tight. I didn't want to sand too much off and have too much gap in. But if you find, like I'm finding now, that they sort of pop open, then you may need to go back in and just sand a little bit away from just one of the doors along the opening there. So I'll do that as well. So push that pin all the way in, and then make sure that the pin at the top is pushed all the way down, otherwise your drawers won't go in. And it's rocking, but that's not the unit, that's actually the cutting mat. I've got a bit of a bubble forming there. I need a new mat really. So I'll just take a piece of fine grade sandpaper there and just really gently take a bit off the inside of that door. Better. So still a little bit tight, but I prefer it like that than to have like a too large a gap down the centre, which doesn't look quite right. So I've got my masking tape to hand as well, and some clamps, and I've put the glue onto my card rather than directly onto the top, because I always end up squeezing out too much. It's more easier to control this way. So spread that on and make sure you're getting it right along the edges, onto the tops of those legs, like that. And then we're going to attach the top so that the straight, unrounded edge is sitting right along the back of those legs. So feel with your fingers to make sure they're sitting nice and flush, and then just check that you've got an even amount overhanging at each side. So I'm just going to slide that over a tiny bit. And then I've got about 1 millimetre, just over 1/32 of an inch overhanging at each edge there. But you should just be able to judge that by eye. Just make sure it looks nice. I'm just checking around the back there, make sure it's flush, and it should be flush against the back of the legs, not the back of the unit. So actually come to the back of those legs like that. Then you can hold on to that and just grab a spare cocktail stick and remove the excess glue. Actually sort of press it down like that. And then I'm going to put a couple of bits of masking tape straight over the top. And then we'll use those clamps along the front edge there. Again, you know this by now, but really important that you secure pieces together, as you'll just find that as the glue dries it all lifts up. And I know I repeat myself an awful lot, and I know a lot of you probably follow all of my tutorials and already know it all, but I'm just saying it in case anybody is coming here for the first time. So a couple of pieces over the back as well there, just to make sure that that's sitting completely flat against the back edge of the unit. And then along the front I like to use clamps because that just holds it together nice and tightly, so you've got no gapping. One at each end. I'm going to try and fit 2 in each drawer opening if I can. And look out for that because it then becomes top heavy, so it will just fall forward. And these orange tipped clamps I find are lovely and strong. I really like these ones. Like that, so that's all held securely, and that can now be left to dry. We're now ready to attach the top piece to the base, so we'll apply glue along the bottom of the top piece. And then we're going to attach it so that the back is flush with the back of the base, and so that there's an even overhang at either side. And I did it so that these sides come just on the inside edge of the legs there, so you can also use that as a guide, but just use your fingers at the back there to make sure you've got that nice flush edge, and make sure your sides also aren't trying to sort of push inwards or curl inwards. Just feeling along that back edge there. And you need to be really careful as well when you're sort of pushing this down, because those sides are quite fragile where we've shaped them. So I'm putting the strength actually onto the flat bit at the back. I just want to have a look from that back edge, make sure that's straight along there. So I've popped it forward at one end there. And then make sure that your side pieces are actually sitting down onto the top part. So sort of press and hold. Bring in a spare cocktail stick to remove any excess glue. Now we're going to use masking tape, but because it's a sort of funny shape, it's going to be quite tricky to get the masking tape on. So make sure you've given it a good press down so that it is actually beginning to take. And then we'll just start by putting a couple of pieces of masking tape straight down the back there. And put it onto the back like that. Hold the back in place. I've got my finger around the front there as well, and just press that down. I'll put another piece this side. And then what we're going to do is loop a piece right over the top. And be really careful when you do this, because that top piece is rather fragile as well. So you don't want to bend it, but what we're doing is we're just sort of holding it downwards so that the back isn't, first of all, sloping backwards, but also so that we're pushing down, applying some pressure to that glue. And we're going to do the same at the sides. In fact, if you cut a nice long piece of tape, you can probably get it over the whole thing. So go right along the top edge like that. Again, pull it firmly, but not too tight so that you're distorting anything along the top edge there, or bending anything out of shape. But you should find that that's just enough to hold it all down. So that should do it, but just have a look around, and if you can see any gapping, you might just need to add a little bit more tape, but just be really careful as you're applying it. So that can now be left to dry, and then as a final touch we just add a little bit of clear wax to that top. So that is now completely dry, and I actually left that drying overnight. And now as a final detail, I'm just going to add a coat of clear wax to the dresser top here. And this stage is optional. You can just leave it with a matte finish like that. And this is actually a clear shoe polish, works really well. You could also use clear furniture polish. If you've got a scented one, that's really nice as well. And I'm just using a tissue here. I usually use kitchen towel, but we've actually run out and can't get hold of any more until our next shop. So I'm just using a piece of tissue. So you just put it on in small circular motions like that. And already you can see that that's really bringing out the richness of the wood there. Even with this sort of soft wood, it really does bring out the grain. And you can still use glue to attach your miniatures or tacky wax. That will still stick, as you'll find that this wax just soaks right into the wood. Be careful not to get it onto the painted areas, otherwise you'll need to paint over it because you won't be able to wipe it off. Just smooth that in. And then just find a clean piece of your tissue or kitchen towel and just give it a buff off like that. And there is the completed piece. And I'm really pleased with this. I made something similar to this quite a few years ago, and I've been looking forward to making another one ever since. So I'm really looking forward to dressing this piece, and I think I'll do that as another Doll's House Diary episode, along with a few other pieces that I want to do in the kitchen. But for this project, that's it, and I really hope you've enjoyed this one. Don't forget, if you enjoy making your own doll's house furniture and miniatures, you might like my books. I've published 5 of them so far, and they're all available to purchase from Amazon. Just go onto Amazon and search for Julie Warren, and they'll all come up. And for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.